Shubhra Chatterji has started recording it since. Okay, so hi everyone. Welcome to session 3 of Dastarkhwan 101. I'll be taking the session today, and Anand is being me. He's going to let people in and handle things, the back end of things. I prepared the entire lecture. I didn't prepare an introduction, but I don't think I need an introduction. All of you know me. I'm Shubhra. I make food shows and I do research on food. And today I'm going to be talking about something which I've been living with for many years. It's the first time I'm doing this session, so basically all of you are guinea pigs. Um, Please let me know how it goes and if you like it, and maybe we can do a few more sessions on these readings. Okay, I'm going to start presenting first and then I shall begin. So there'll be a bunch of things I'll be taking you guys through today, a couple of presentations. I mean, one is a presentation, and Anand Gargi can't hear. Gargi, maybe you can try logging in and out. I think the others can hear me.
Shubhra, your audio, everything is clear. Just you keep carrying on.
Okay. Yeah, I was just presenting. Right. Okay, so what we're doing today is essentially the session. I've decided to call it Reading Food in the Texts, quote unquote, translations of texts available to us from the Mughal period, because they were not written in English, they were written in Farsi, or they were written in Turkic, or they were written in other dialects. I mean, some were written in Italian and French, but they weren't written in English. So today we'll be reading the English translations of these texts. Okay, now this is a very special moment in my life. I bought my copy of the Baburnama in 2014. It was winter, and I remember that because I remember I was wearing warm clothes. And I bought it from Maulvi ji, who you see in this picture over here. He has had a tiny bookstall in Connaught Place. Some of you who live in Delhi might even be knowing him. I haven't been there in 3 years now, so I don't know if he's still there. And over the years, I've bought many books from him. Some of them are here. Some of these books are right here. I have marked little bits and parts that we'll be reading from today. Yeah, but why I'm telling you this is, it was because it was on that day, that winter day, that I think I truly came into my own as far as food research is concerned. Coincidentally, this was on the same trip on which I'd met Salma Appa a few days earlier. Maybe the two are connected. I had met her for research. I was doing research on the Lucknow and Delhi episodes of Lost Recipes. And this was, we shot the Lucknow episode in December 2014. By that time, I'd been working with food history for about a year, sort of, because we'd done the pilot for Lost Recipes in January that year. And finally, the show got commissioned, I think, in September, and we started shooting in October. So it had been like about a year of doing research on food history per se. The stuff I'd done before that was not really history. It was stories around food. It was Chakle India, or it was with Chef Vicky. I'd done a show called Cook, Eat and Party, I remember, in 2013. So yeah, so basically food history for me started in late 2013, early 2014. But at that time, there were very few people who were like into food history. One can say there were very few people who were experts, very few people who were working in this field. I was spending days in libraries and archives, and people told me that there was nothing really that's written about the history of Indian food, that the study of our culinary history is wrought, actually, affected by our refusal to keep records or to codify cuisine. And there were a handful of people, like I was saying, there was Pushpeshji, there was Appa, Mohsina Ma'am, Mohsina Muqaddam, there was Dr. Kurush Dalal, Vikram Doctor, and I was just getting to know them. And so this step of getting myself the Babarnama, of reaching out beyond the written word, of reaching out beyond Katie Achaya's historical dictionary of Indian food, or a historical companion to Indian food, was the big step for me, because this is when I went, from reading what had been culled out or what was being told to me, to actually beginning to read stuff for myself. When I read Achaya, for example, I find him mentioning other books. He would mention the Kutini Mata of Damodara Gupta, for example, or he would mention the Manasulasa. The Babar Nama says this, or the Aine Akbari says this. And I was like, oh, okay, let me get these books and see what is mentioned and said for myself. And when I did that, when I actually opened up the Babar Nama and started reading it, it was boom. It was like this realization that, Holy Mother of God, but there is so much that's written in these books. Yes, it is in bits and pieces, but there is a lot written, and I mean, it's in bits and pieces because the books are not about food. It's not a cookbook, right? So, but what I realized was that you can't write history without writing about food. You can't write history without mentioning food, because food is a very, very important part of history. I mean, look at us now. You're sitting at home today instead of going out because it's a lockdown, simply because one man in China decided to eat a bat. So, food and history are constantly connected. And this is very evident in our chronicles also. As we will read, you will see. Okay, so we will start with the Babarnama, not because that was the first book I bought, but because Babur was the first Mughal, and he was actually one of the two Mughal Badshahs who wrote his biography himself. The other one was Jahangir. Humayun was always on the run. Akbar was dyslexic, so he couldn't write his own autobiography. He got his friend to chronicle it for him. Abul Fazl will read from that as well. Shah Jahan was too busy building Taj Mahal and Lal Killa and other monuments, and Aurangzeb was too busy trying to capture the Deccan to do any writing. So it was only Babur actually and Jahangir who have written their own autobiographies, and it's fascinating. So let me see if okay. So this is the first. I have this here, and we will start to read from it. Okay, I hope you guys can see this. Anand, can you see this? It's clear. Now, I'll tell you.
Everything is clear. Please keep carrying on. Everything is very clear.
Okay, wonderful. Now, the memoirs of Babur are called the Babarnama. I don't have my copy with me here, but that was the first book, like I said, I bought from Maulvi ji. If you can see that this says it's section 3. The first section of the Babarnama is, Fargana. It's called Fargana. The second section is called Kabul, and the third is called Hindustan. Fargana is the first, few years of Babur's rule. He became the king of Fargana at the age of 12 when his father died in a freak accident. Kabul is, the middle period of his life where he had moved out of Fargana and Samarkand, and he was capturing other areas. And while he was in Kabul, he longed to capture Hindustan. That was his ultimate and final dream. And Hindustan is starts from when this last expedition of his towards Hindustan was made, and he eventually captured and became the Badshah, the first Badshah of Hindustan. So if you can see, it says in November 17th, on Friday, the last of the month of Safar, at the date 932, the sun being in the sign of Archer, we set out for Hindustan, crossed a small rise of Yaklanga, and dismounted in the meadow to the west of the water of Dihi Yaqub. Abdul Maluk, the armorer, came into the camp. He had gone 7 or 8 months earlier as my envoy to Sultan Said Khan, and now brought one of the Khan's men, styled, that's the name, the new Beg, who conveyed letters and small presents and verbal messages from the Khanims and the Khans. So this is essentially the first entry of the Hindustan section. This does not mention food, but very soon after this comes the next day, the very next day, November 18th. After staying 2 days in that camp, which he mentions on the previous page, for the convenience of the army, we marched on, halted one night, and the next night dismounted at Badam Chashma. Chashma is basically a spring of water, and as you will go on, you see that they often stop near water bodies or springs, so they have water to drink. There we ate a confection called majui. Okay, it says majui here. Let's go on and read a little more. November 22nd, we don't really, this doesn't mention, I've only put it here because it's in sequence, so you sort of follow and you understand from this first reading that how often food is mentioned. Right up in the on his second day entry, he's mentioned what he's eaten. 22nd November, nothing has been mentioned. November 24th, he mentions that he has a violent discharge. So it's not just the eating that's being mentioned. You must know that the discharges are also often mentioned. By God's mercy, it passed off easily. Then we come to Saturday. On Saturday, we dismounted in the Baghi Wafa. We delayed there a few days, we stayed there a few days, waiting for Humayun and the army from that side. More than once in this history, the bounds and extent, charm and delight of that garden have been described. It is most beautifully placed. So he was living in a beautiful garden and he was waiting for his son Humayun, who was late. And later, right in the end, he mentions that he wrote a harsh letter to Humayun, lecturing him severely because of his long delay. But if you see what they were doing while they were in the garden, during the short time we went there, most people drank on drinking days. So they were drinking days. From this, we understand that they were drinking days and took their morning. On non-drinking days, there were parties for Majun. So this is the same thing that has been mentioned earlier. Like on the first page, if you see, it's Majui. On the second page, there's Majun. And when you start trying to understand what Majun is, I mean, I'm sure Chef Vicky will be able to tell us, or if there's anyone else who's Sindhi in the house, Majun is a sort of a sweet, okay? So I went onto Google, I did a search, okay, what is Majun? Majun is this barfi-like sweet, which has dry fruits and khoya and, badam, dates, poppy seeds, sugar, almonds. So that is the Majun, that's the first Majun that I found. Then I went a little further. I did a search for Majun recipe from Persia, because very often these recipes have come to us from, Central Asia and Persia. And over there, it is a sort of a banana and date shake. It's like a smoothie or a milkshake with banana and dates. And then I looked up another spelling of Majun, Majoun, Majun. And it is basically, that Majun is a Moroccan confection which resembles a pastry ball. It is actually very similar to the Sindhi Majun, with fudgy, jammy, and ingredients include honey and nuts, as you can see here. But if you look closely at the recipe, if you look over here, okay, can you see this ingredient? Can you see the cannabis over here? Right? You can see it. You can see it here as well. So the Moroccan Majun, from that I understood that it was a way to consume cannabis. It was a way to consume marijuana. Okay, so that is the Majun that is being spoken about, most likely. And then I looked up the Majun a little more, and I found this article. One doesn't know how authentic the writing is, but what it calls, it says that the Majun is the granddaddy of all cannabis edibles. And it sort of figures that on non-drinking days, Majun would be consumed. It is mentioned that it is a confection and that it is sweet. One more, but we can't really say for sure what it is. Okay, so I did like more of a search, and another Majun that I found was this Hamdard Majun Arad Khurma, which is used in the treatment of erectile dysfunction and premature ejaculation. And that is also a majun. And eventually, all of this led me to the fact that I found written somewhere that majun is actually a mixture of things. Hence a lot of things are called majun. So whether that confection, we know it was a sweet, so it really points to the Moroccan Sindhi majun that was being talked about, and we know it's eaten and it's not drunk, so it's not a smoothie or a shake. It's more like a sweet. So that is, it most probably is a sort of a cannabis consumable that was being spoken about in the Babarnama. So that is essentially what reading the Babarnama does to you. You start, you find words, and then you go down a rabbit hole looking for what they could have been. Okay, so that was the first thing. Now we'll move on to the next part. Okay. Now for the next part, I'm going to stop sharing this presentation. Just give me a second, because I have a document on which I have, um, put down excerpts from the Babarnama, so you can all see that while I read it. Just give me a second. I will present again. Right. Okay. So this document has many excerpts, not just from the Babarnama, but from the other texts also. We have read this first part about the Majun. This section has been read. Now we come to the second part. There's a whole section in which Babar describes the vegetable products of Hindustan. Now we've all heard that he didn't like the fruits of Hindustan, but that he liked the mango. But that's all that we know, all that we've heard, all that we've seen written. Now, when I started reading this section of the Babarnama, there was so much more. There is, okay, let's just start. We'll go through this quickly because there's quite a bit. The mango, it starts with the mango. The mango is one of the fruits peculiar to Hindustan. Hindustanis pronounce the B in its name as though no vowel followed. For example, amb, not amba, amba. And this being awkward to utter, some people call the fruit nagzak, as Khwaja Khusrau did. Amir Khusrau wrote a lot about mangoes. I think he even wrote a poem on mangoes. Mangoes, when good, are very good, but many are, as are eaten, few are first rate. So there are lots of mangoes, but very few are first rate. Okay, we agree. They're usually plucked unripe and ripened in the house. Unripe, they make excellent condiments, are good also preserved in syrup. In one of the footnotes here, it mentions that somebody had presented mangoes preserved in honey to Babar, and that is what he was talking about. Taking it all together, the mango is the best fruit of Hindustan. Some so praise it as to give it preference over all other fruits except the musk melon, but such praise outmatches it. There's another section of the Babarnama in which he's writing a letter to somebody back in Kabul, and he mentions that a muskmelon was brought to him. A muskmelon from Kabul was brought to him, and when he cut it open and he ate it, he cried. So Babar loved his melons. He loved his muskmelon. So for him, the mango was never as good as the muskmelon. As you read on, it keeps on, describing different things about the mango, saying that the tree is large and has a leaf somewhat resembling a peach tree. The trunk is ill-looking and ill-shaped, but in Bengal and Gujarat, it is heard of as growing handsome. So that is the mango. He also mentions the plantain. I'm sure that all of you can read what is on screen. And he says the plantain here seems to me to be the banana. Its tree is not very tall. Indeed, it is not to be called a tree since it is something between a grass and a tree. Its leaf is a little like that of the amankara, but it grows about 2 yards long and nearly 1 broad, which is the perfect description of the leaf of the banana tree. Out of the middle of the leaves rises heart like a bud, which resembles a sheep's heart. Beautiful. And as each petal of this bud expands, there grows at its base a row of 6 or 7 flowers, which become the plantains. What a beautiful explanation. This is exactly what it looks like when those little fingers emerge from the base of the bud and start growing into bananas. These flowers become visible with the lengthening of the heart-like shoot and the opening of the petals of the bud, so on and so forth. So this is the banana. The next fruit he mentions is the Tamarindus indica, the tamarind. Um, and by this name, people call the khurma, sheer khurma, where khurma means date. Okay, so he's talking about the date of Hindustan. It was called the Khurme Hind, the Indian date tree. It has finely cut leaves, precisely like those of the buya, except that they're not so finely cut. And it is a very good looking tree, giving dense shade. It grows wild in masses too. Okay, now this one, I maybe you can read what it is, but I just want you to read it for yourself and see if you can make out what he's talking about. It's a very, very common flower and very common tree. If you can, please put it in the comments and I will see if you've guessed what it is that is being spoken about. Nothing yet? Yes. Yes, Sabah. He's speaking of the mahua. That's exactly what it is. Yes. So lovely. Now, I mean, and from these descriptions, you just, I mean, from this particular one, you understand, like you understand from the description what he's talking about. It's so familiar to us, and to think that all of this is there in the Babarnama. I have now these unhighlighted sections are other fruits he writes about. The highlighted ones, I've highlighted them because I wanted to read them out to you. The next one I want to read out to you is the jackfruit. Um, this is the kathal. This is a fruit of singular form and flavor. It looks like sheep's stomach stuffed and made into a haggis. Jeepa, it is called. Jeepa or Gipa, I'm not sure, but I'm saying Jeepa. And it is sicklingly sweet. Inside are filbert like stones, which on the whole resemble dates but are round, not long, and have softer substance. These are eaten. The jackfruit is very adhesive. For this reason, people are said to oil mouth and hands before eating it. It is heard of also as growing not only on the branches of its trees, but on the trunk and root too. One would say that the tree was all hung around with haggises. Now, it's very interesting that he mentions haggis because this tells us that this is something that was eaten then. The jeepa is basically sheep's stomach stuffed with rice, mincemeat, and spices and boiled as a pudding. And the fact that this is mentioned, this is a footnote, okay, what I've put here, this line, the 3 mentioned over here, that's a footnote. It tells us that the jeepa was eaten then. So this is straight away a recipe which is from that time, which has been mentioned in the Babarnama. So this is how you read the Babarnama, read food in the Babarnama and extract recipes from it, from in between these descriptions. And I'm telling you, it's the most joyful thing to do. I mean, I can do this for hours. Just keep reading and finding these little clues. Okay, so more fruits are being mentioned. Let's see if I've highlighted anything else I want to read. There is the gular, there's the amla. Oh, and there is this as well. Okay, there's another recipe that's mentioned here. The chirunjit is another. This is basically, he's talking about chironji. This tree has been understood to grow in the hills, but I knew later about it because there were 3 or 4 clumps of it in our gardens. It is much like the mahua. Its kernel is not bad, a thing between the walnut and the almond, not bad. Rather smaller than the pistachio and round. People put it in custards and sweetmeats. Okay, so by custards, what is written there reads to me like a paluda, which is what the predecessor of the faluda was called, and sweetmeats, which is halwa. So chironji was put in these two things. So there you have two more recipes written right there for you without this being a recipe book. So yeah, that is so. This is essentially little bits and pieces from the Baburnama. Let's see what we have next. What we have next is the date palm. And why I've highlighted this is because he's talking about the liquor. He's talking about toddy. So we've seen recipes so far, we've seen fruits so far, but this is the first time we see the mention of drinking and drinks. Oh, of course, he also mentioned that the mahua flower is distilled into alcohol. So what he says about the date palm is that the tree so grows where its leaves come out is cheese white. The leaves becoming green as they lengthen. The white part, the so-called cheese, is tolerable eating, not bad, much like the walnut. People make a wound in the cheese and into this wound insert a leaflet in such a way that all liquid flowing from the wound runs down it. The tip of the leaflet is set over the mouth of the pot, suspended to the tree in such a way that it collects whatever liquor is yielded by the wound. This liquor is rather pleasant if drunk at once. If drunk after 2 or 3 days, people say it is quite exhilarating. Once, when I'd gone to visit Bari and made a small excursion to the villages on the bank of the Chambal River, we met people collecting this date liquor in the valley bottom. A good deal. I was drunk, that he drank a good deal, but no hilarity was felt. Much must be drunk, seemingly, to produce a little cheer. This is so cute. Much toddy must be drunk to produce a little cheer, according to Babar. It's actually very interesting when they write it themselves, as you will see also in Jahangir's Tuzuke Jahangiri. The Baburnama and the Tuzuke Jahangiri are actually my favorite to read because it's first person accounts. It's actually very, very quaint writing from these men who were, busy in battle and killing all the time, but you see this other side to them. Okay. So I think this is we've seen enough of this. We've seen enough of this portion of the Baburnama. The other section of the Baburnama I want to write about, and I'm scrolling down to it through all of this um, fruity, through all the fruity parts, is a famous incident in which Ibrahim Lodi's mother, she's called the old lady by Babur in his in the Baburnama. She tried to poison him. Okay, she attempted to poison Babur by giving poison to the man who tasted his food and getting him to sprinkle it on his plate. Now, this is Babur's description of it, and this description happens in a letter that he writes to somebody, telling them of this incident. Okay, so as you can see, the letter is inserted here just as it was written, without addition or taking away, and is as follows. The details of the momentous event of Friday, the 16th of the first, I don't know how to pronounce that, Ruffle, in the date 933, which is actually 21st December 1526, are as follows. 1526 is when Babur took over the throne in Delhi. I think he took over in June 1526, and Ibrahim Lodi's mother tried to poison him in December 1526. The ill-omened old woman, Ibrahim's mother, heard that I ate things from the hands of Hindustanis. The thing being that 3 or 4 months earlier, as I had not seen Hindustani dishes, I had ordered Ibrahim's cooks to be brought out, and out of 50 or 60 had kept 4. Of this she heard. She sent to Itawa for Ahmad the Chashnigir. In Hindustan, they called a taster a bakwat. What I think he's talking about the Turkic word. In Hindustan, they call a taster a chashnigir. And having got him, she gave a tola of poison wrapped in a square of paper. As has been mentioned, a tola is rather more than 2 again, I don't know how to pronounce this word, but he's basically telling you how much it is. kadals into the hand of a slave woman who was to give it to him. That poison Ahmad gave to the Hindustani cooks in our kitchen, promising them 4 parganas if they would get it somehow into the food. Following the first slave woman, that ill omened old woman sent a second to see if the first did or did not give the poison she had received to Ahmad. Well, well was it that Ahmad that put the poison not into the cooking pot? Okay, well was it? Like it was good that Ahmad put the poison not into the cooking pot but on a dish. He did not put it into a pot because I had strictly ordered the tasters to compel any Hindustanis who were present while the food was cooking in the pots to taste that food. Our graceless tasters were neglectful when the food was being dished up. Thin slices of bread, now you can see what was served to him. Thin slices of bread were put on a porcelain dish, and you can see how and what it was served to him in. Thin slices of bread were put on a porcelain dish. On these, less than half of the paper packet of poison was sprinkled, and over this, buttered fritters were laid. It would have been bad if the poison had been strewn on the fritters or thrown into the pot. In his confusion, the man threw the larger half into the fireplace. So बेचारा डर गया और आधा उसने फेंक दिया. And so Babar got saved. On Friday, late after, what happened to him after eating? Now he's describing that. On Friday, late after the afternoon prayer, when the cooked meats were set out, I ate a good deal of a dish of hare and also much fried carrot, took a few mouthfuls of the poisoned Hindustani food without noticing any unpleasant flavor, took also a mouthful or two of dried meat. Then I felt sick. As some dried meat eaten on the previous day had an unpleasant taste, I thought my nausea was due to the dried meat. Again and again, my heart rose. After retching 2 or 3 times, I was near vomiting on the tablecloth, and at last I saw it would not do, got up, went retching every moment of the way to the water closet. Aab khana. And on reaching it, I vomited much. Never had I vomited after food. Used not to do so indeed while drinking. Used not to do so indeed while drinking. I became suspicious. Now he's saying because I never vomited when even after I drank, I became suspicious. I had the cooks put in. I had the cooks put in word and ordered some of the vomit given to a dog. Okay, so basically had the cooks imprisoned and ordered some of the vomit given to a dog and the dog to be watched. It was somewhat out of sorts near the first watch of the next day. Its belly was swollen, and however much people threw stone at it and turned it threw stones at it and turned it over, it did not get up. So basically, the dog was sluggish and its belly was swollen. It had clearly been poisoned. In that state, it remained till midday. It then got up. It did not die. One of the braves who had also eaten of that dish vomited a good deal the next day, and one was in very bad state. In the end, all escaped. An evil arrived but happily passed on. God gave me a new birth. I am coming from that other world. I am born today of my mother. I was sick. I live through God. I know today the worth of life. After this, he basically ordered his paymaster to watch the cook when he was taken for torture. And the cook related the above particulars one after the other, basically how he was poisoned. And then it also, goes on to say that the women were questioned and who was punished. One was shot with a matchlock, and the old woman was held captive. She will meet her doom one day. The taster I had cut in pieces. That Chashni Gir who poisoned him was cut in pieces. So this describes the incident of Babar's poisoning. And through reading this, we also understand what he ate, how he ate, and how it was served. We also see that he ate fried carrots and hare and dry meat. So all of this gives us an idea to the kind of meals that were consumed, the kind of food that was on the table, and the fact that he had hired, having never seen Hindustani food, he had hired Hindustani cooks in his kitchens, 4 Hindustani cooks in his kitchens. And so the food that he was eating was a combination of the food that he was familiar with, from Fargana, Samarkand, and Kabul, and the food of Hindustan. So yes, so this is basically what I have from the Babarnama. Now let's come back here. Right. Okay. So now, okay, I'm seeing lots of comments, but no questions yet, I think. So this was basically the Baburnama. Now we will move on to the next Badshah and what was written not by him, but by his sister. Just give me a second, guys. 1 second. I'm just opening up the working out of two laptops. I'm just opening up the other one. Right. So now after Babur, we are moving to Humayun. This is the book. It's called The History of Humayun. That's the translated version. And if you can see over here, it says written by Gul Badan Begum. And it's very cute that when you read a translation of this, the first translation of this, the translator has written the name Gul Badan Begum as Princess Rose Body. It's actually quite adorable. I think I'm still presenting. Yeah. Huh. So can you see this now? I think it would be clearer. The History of Humayun, written by Princess Gul Badan Begum or Princess Rose Body. Um, So Babur was the first Mughal emperor of India, and he defeated Ibrahim Lodi in the first battle of Panipat in 1526. He ruled from Delhi till 1530, and he was succeeded by his son Humayun. Humayun was at that time only 22 years old when Babur died. And Gulbadan Begum, who wrote the book, was only 8 years old when Babur died. So when Humayun took over, she was just a young girl. And the first part of this book, okay, is called Under Babur. The first part of this text it describes the life of Gulbadan Begum when her father was still alive, her earliest memories of Babur and Humayun under him. Okay, so this is the 8 years before Humayun sat on the throne. I'm going to read this part to you, what it says on the jacket. It's an explanation of the book. I will read this part out to you, and then we'll go into other details. Princess Gulbadan Begum witnessed the reign of three Mughal emperors. Now we'll find out why she wrote this book. She witnessed the reign of three Mughal emperors: her father Babur's, her brother Humayun's, and her nephew Akbar's. Perhaps this explains Akbar's choice of Gulbadan, the only woman, along with Johar and Bayazid, who were the steward and bearer of Humayun, when he ordered these three to write down whatever you know of the doings of Firdaus Makani and Jannat Ashiani. Firdaus Makani is the sobriquet that was given to Babur, and Jannat Ashiani is Humayun. Babur and Humayun, that's who they are. Akbar wanted to help his friend Abul Fazl gather materials for his Akbarnama, hence this order. Gulbadan's efforts culminated in the Humayun Nama, what we know today as the history of Humayun. Her matter-of-fact style did not impress Akbar, though Abul Fazl did not hesitate to copy verbatim parts of her work without acknowledgement. तब से औरतों को acknowledgement नहीं मिल रहा था अपने काम के लिए, देख लीजिए, which is why, okay, let me not go there. That's a different lecture. Okay, for this reason, only 3 copies were made out of her book, out of which only one survived and reached the British Museum, of course, like everything else. It also reached the British Museum. Here, Annette S. Beveridge chanced upon this almost unknown work and published its translation in 1900. When she wrote this Humayun Nama, Gulbadan was more than 60 years old. Also, she had to depend mainly on her memory. As such, facts occasionally do not tally and dates are jumbled. Her interest was people and not events, so her chronicle is highly successful in conjuring up visions for the reader of feelings, emotions, quarrels, and reconciliation of a group of men and women. So that's what it says. And now we will start reading bits and pieces of the book. I have marked out little sections which have some mentions of food. But before we begin, what we must understand of Humayun is that for 15 years he was wandering, so he ruled for the first 10 years. 1530 to 1540 is when he sat on the throne, as the Badshah of Hindustan. But 1540 to 55 is 15 years he was in exile. He was wandering around. So a lot of the food that is mentioned here, and compared to what you find in the Babar-Nama, little food is mentioned. The focus wasn't so much on the royal kitchens or what was being cooked. The focus was on what was being eaten to survive. Where they were finding food and where they were finding water. I also have these experts. I'm saying excerpts. So I will present, and then we will start reading. So you can read at the same time as me. It's better than me reading from a book and you can't see what I'm reading. Take a second. All right. Uh, you can see what I'm presenting. And then just let me know if you guys can see what I'm presenting.
It's too small. You need to zoom in.
Okay. अब ठीक है?
Some more. Yeah, reduce it a little bit. Yeah, reduce it a little bit.
हाँ, 1 second. Just tell me when it's right.
Yeah, it's fine now. It's fine now. It's fine. No, the earlier, yeah, that was fine. Yeah.
Okay. Chalo, I hope this is what it is. Um, Okay, so this first little bit is about when she met Babar. Is a meeting that she describes. This is from her childhood, from when she was about 6 years old. So and this is the first mention of food in the Humayunama. So I'm just going to read this out, and then we'll go to more. Um, this is when she and some other begums, including her mother, who she calls my lady, came from Kabul to Hindustan. And she calls herself this insignificant one, came with her in advance of my sisters and paid my duty to my royal father. Right? So we will go down a little bit. This section I couldn't highlight because it's, pictures. At the time of her meeting His Majesty, she desired me to come by daylight and pay my respects to him. Little Gulbadan was to go to pay her respects to her father. 9 troopers with 2 sets of 9 horses and 2 extra litters, which the emperor had sent, and 1 litter which had been brought from Kabul, and about 100 of my lady's Mughal servants mounted on fine horses, all elegance and beauty. All of this was just being done so that a little girl could meet her father. My royal father's Khalifa with his wife Sultanam came as far as Nogram to meet us. My mamas had made me alight at the little garden, and having spread a small carpet, seated me on it. They instructed me to rise when Khalifa came in and to embrace him. When he came, I rose and embraced him. Then his wife Sultanam came in, and I came in too. This is on the next page. And I, not knowing, wished to get up, but Khalifa raised objections and said, "She is your old serving woman. There is no need to rise for her. Your father has exalted this old servant by giving such an order about him. So be it. What power have slaves?" I didn't quite understand what that last line meant. But we are coming to the food now. From Khalifa, she accepted 6,000 Sharukis and 5 horses, and Sultanam gave her 3,003 horses. And then Sultanam said, "A hasty meal is ready. If you will eat, you will honor your servants." I consented. There was a raised platform in a pleasant spot and a pavilion of red cloth with lining of Gujarati brocade. I love the fact that it mentions particularly Gujarati brocade, and 6 canopies of cloth and brocade, each of a differing color, and a square enclosure of cloth with painted poles. So this was the setup where they sat and they ate. I sat in Khalifa's quarters. The meal drew out to almost 50 roast sheep and bread and sharbat and much fruit. Having at length eaten my breakfast, I got into my litter and went and paid my duty to my royal father. I fell at his feet. He asked me many questions and took me for a time in his arms, and then this insignificant one felt such happiness that greater could not be imagined. So this was the description of a meal that was eaten, in which 50 there were about 50 roast sheep. There was bread, there was sharbat, and there was fruit. So it sort of, still tells you that the food which was being eaten at this time, just after Babur had become the Bacha of Hindustan, was largely still not given to the kind of excesses of spices that were being used, which Appa also mentioned, or the fantastical dishes like all kinds of pulaus and all colors of dahi. All of that came later. This was still simple, rustic fare. Okay, so that is one reading. Now, in the next section is when Humayun was on the run. The prayer before sleep had passed before they reached, I think that's the last azan of the day, had passed before they reached the foot of the mountain. The snow lay deep, so there was no road to go up by. Their minds were full of anxiety, lest that unjust creature, Mirza, I think that's Mirza Askari, should follow them. At last they found a way up and climbed it in some sort of fashion. They were all night in the snow, and at first there was neither wood or fire nor food to eat. Life on the run can be difficult even for a king, even for a bacha. Now, this continues from it. This is right after. They grew very hungry and feeble. The emperor gave orders to kill a horse. There was nothing else, so the emperor gave orders to kill a horse. There was no cooking pot. So they boiled some of the flesh in a helmet, and some they roasted. They made fires on all four sides, and with his own blessed hand, the emperor roasted some meat which he ate. Now, I think this is the only incident that I have come across so far in which we have, one of the badshahs doing any form of cooking on his own, if you can call roasting horse meat on a fire while they're on the run cooking. This is actually the only incident I found so far. I mean, maybe there are others. I just haven't. I mean, like you can't be. I haven't read through all of this. I've read only through some of these, some sections of these books. Maybe there's other incidents as well. He used to say my head was very frozen. My head was frozen by the intense cold. I know that feeling. It happens to me when I'm up in Kodgaon and in the winters. My head gets frozen by the intense cold. Okay, morning came at last and he pointed to another mountain. Now, this section again just describes what they were going through. It doesn't describe food, but it describes, how difficult his life was. Yeah, this is the same thing. What do we have next? Okay, now this is the section I want you to read again. This describes how difficult it was, if you can see where my cursor is. This describes how difficult it was for them to find water also, clean drinking water. And when we read the Aine Akbari next, you will see what lengths one went to get, water from the Ganges to the king, to the Badshah. Next morning, they marched on. For 3 days, they found no water. On the fourth, they came to some very deep wells, the water of which was extraordinarily red. The emperor halted and alighted near one of the wells. The Tardi Beg Khan was at another, and at a third, Mirza Yadgar and Munim Khan and Nadim Kuka, Kaka, Patani. And at the fourth, there was somebody else and somebody else. As each bucket came out of the wells into reach, people flung themselves on it. The ropes broke, and 5 or 6 persons fell into the wells of the bucket. Many perished from thirst. When the emperor saw men flinging themselves into the wells from thirst, he let anyone drink from his own water bottle. When everyone had drunk his fill, they marched on again at afternoon prayer time. So that is how difficult sometimes it would get on the run. This is more or less, what you find in the Humayun Nama incidents like this, and descriptions of food such as this. But connecting to where we are next, you also find the birth of Jalaluddin Akbar, Jalaluddin Muhammad Akbar Ghazi mentioned in the book. So I put that excerpt here also, so we could just read it, because that's what we're going to. We're going to next. We're going to Akbar's time next. There was born His Imperial Majesty, the world's refuge and conqueror, Jalaluddin Muhammad Akbar Ghazi. The moon was in Leo. It was of a very good omen that the birth was in a fixed sign, and the astrologers said a child so born would be fortunate and long lived. Akbar was born in 1942, so this was about 2 years into the run, and he was born in a place called Umerkot, which is now in Pakistan. And the Rana, I think the local king of Umerkot, was helpful, and hence they had halted over there, and Akbar was born there. And in another place, it mentions that where Akbar was born had a lot of food. The king was highly delighted, and by way of reward and largesse, Nisar, for the tidings, he forgave all soever of Tardi Muhammad Khan's past offences. Tardi Muhammad Khan brought the news to him. He gave the child the name he had heard in his dream at Lahore, the Emperor Jalaluddin Muhammad Akbar. So that was the description of the birth of Akbar. Which brings us now to, sorry, the Akbarnama I haven't put here because there was too much. So we will read that from the book. Just give me a second. I will stop presenting. Crazy, no? It's almost 5 o'clock, and we've only just read from 2 texts. It's just, it's the scope of this is immense. Initially when I was planning these sessions. Anand, have I think I've stopped presenting. Initially when I was planning these sessions, I thought कि एक session में हो जाएगा, but now I feel that we need multiple sessions. And I'm not even reading everything that is there. I'm just reading bits and pieces, of what is there in these books. We need multiple sessions just to get through this. Like I thought we'd do, the Babar Nama, we'll do the Humayun Nama, we'll do the Ane Akbari, and then we'll do some parts from, the Tuzuke Jahangiri, and then also the travelers' accounts. They all here, these travelers' accounts which are there. They also describe various things, feasts and markets and everything that the travelers saw when they were traveling through Mughal Hindustan. But we will need more time to do all of that. Let us focus on the Aine Akbari, bits and parts of it. I forgot to keep water for myself. Oh, silly. Okay, so the Aine Akbari is actually begins with describing who the writer is, Akbar's friend and a minister in his court, Abul Fazl, but we won't go into that because that will take up a lot of our time. I am just going to read out first the contents that I'm focusing on, okay? So on page 57 of this, it begins. Let me hold it up. I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but over here, if you can see, this is where it starts. This is the Abdar Khana, and that is the section where it starts. The food, the description of the kitchens and the food. Before that, they describe the household and various other things. So Abdar Khana. Ab is water, and Abdar Khana is the water section, if one may call it that. His Majesty calls this the source of life, the water of immortality, and he committed the care of this department. This was a department. So this is basically the department of water. He committed the care of this department to proper persons. He does not drink much, but pays attention to this matter. So he does not drink much water, but he pays a lot of attention to this matter. Both at home and on travels, he drinks Ganges water. Some trustworthy persons are stationed on the banks of that river who dispatch the water in sealed jars. I'm just going to take a second and get myself some water to drink because I'm reading about water and my throat is feeling a little dry. Just give me a second. I'm turning the camera off so I can get up and run off in an ungainly fashion and get myself a little water. I'll be back in exactly a minute. I'm back. Just a second. Just a second. Okay, we are back. So we were talking about some trustworthy persons are stationed on the banks of that river. Now remember that after Babur's poisoning, essentially, the Mughals were always very scared of being poisoned. So only the most trustworthy of people were entrusted with these activities and jobs, which involved food that was to be consumed, food and drink that were to be consumed by the Badshahs. They also used jade drinking cups and plates to eat and drink because the poison in that, poison shows up in jade, like the color changes. Some trustworthy persons are stationed on the banks of that river who dispatch the water in sealed jars. When the court was at the capital Agra and in Fatehpur, the water came from the district of Soran. But now that His Majesty is in the Punjab, the water is brought from Haridwar. For the cooking of the water, now if you drink water beyond Haridwar from the Ganga, you'll probably die of food poisoning. For the cooking of the food, rainwater, water taken from the Jamuna and the Chenab are used, mixed with a little Ganges water. On journeys and hunting parties, His Majesty, from his predilection for good water, appoints experienced men as water tasters. So that is basically the section of water. It goes on to describe how the water is purified, what is done to it. So I have only read like this part of it and a little more. All of this is a description of what happens with the pani. The area Akbari is it's a treasure. I mean, it's things described in such detail over here that you will. It's more detailed than a cookbook that you find on the shelves of bookshops these days. Let's read a bit about the imperial kitchen. That is our next topic. If you can see right here, the next section we are reading, it's the imperial kitchen. His Majesty even extends his Majesty, of course, is Akbar. His Majesty even extends, and since this is being written by Abul Fazl, it is not written in first person. His Majesty even extends his attention to this department, that is the kitchen department, and has given many wise regulations for it. Nor can a reason be given why he should not do so, as the equilibrium of man's nature, the strength of the body, the capability of receiving external and internal blessings, and the acquisition of worldly and religious advantages depend ultimately on proper care being shown for appropriate food. I think we should print this out and put it up in every kitchen. This knowledge distinguishes man from beasts. It's true. Cooking is what distinguishes us from every other animal, every other species. If His Majesty did not possess so lofty a mind, so comprehensive an understanding, of course, there will be a lot of praise for Akbar because he has commissioned the writing of this book. So universal a kindness, he would have chosen a path of solitude and given up sleep and food altogether. And even now, when he's taken upon himself the temporal and spiritual leadership of the people, the question, what dinner has been prepared today, never passes over his tongue. In the course of 24 hours, His Majesty eats but once and leaves off before he is fully satisfied. Neither is there a fixed time for this meal, but the servants have always things so far ready that in the space of an hour after the order has been given, 100 dishes are served up. Can you imagine? They're like in readiness. All the mesa has been done and kept, and they're just waiting कि order आएगा और हम खिलाएंगे बादशाह को. The food allowed to the women of the seraglio, I don't understand what that word means, commences, maybe I should look it up, commences to be taken from the kitchen in the morning and goes on till night. Trustworthy and experienced people are appointed to this department, and all good servants attached to the court are resolved to perform well whatever service they have undertaken. The head is assisted by the Prime Minister himself. His Majesty has entrusted the latter the affairs of the state, but especially this important department. Matlab, the Prime Minister was taking care of this department. Okay, the Seraglio is harem. Okay, thanks for that, Rashina. So goes on for a bit, talks about the master of the kitchen, but that basically essentially tells you what care and what importance was given to food, and sort of explains a little bit of how Akbar ate. We'll continue. Cooks from all countries prepare a great variety of dishes of all kinds, of grains, greens, meats, also oily, sweet, and spicy dishes. Every day, such dishes are prepared as nobles can scarcely command at their feast. Such dishes are prepared as the nobles can scarcely command at their feast, from which you may infer how exquisite the dishes are which are prepared for His Majesty. In the beginning of the year, the sub-treasurers make out an annual estimate and receive the amount. The money bags and the door of the storehouse being sealed with the seals of Mir Bakawal and the writer. Mir Bakawal, Appa told us, was the head chef, the head of the kitchen, the main, the person in charge. And every month, a correct statement of the daily expenditure is drawn up, the receipt for which is sealed by the same two officers when it is entered under the head of the expenditure. Okay, I don't think we want to go too much into kitchen finances. So let's go into the next part. Okay. Bad characters, idle talkers, unknown persons are never employed. No one is entertained without a personal security, nor is personal acquaintance sufficient. The victuals are served up in dishes of gold and silver, stone and earthenware, some of the dishes being in charge of each of the sub-bakawals. Okay, so sub-bakawals, some sub-bakawals are in charge of certain dishes, is what this is saying. During the time of cooking, when the victuals are taken out, an awning is spread and onlookers kept away. The cooks tuck up their sleeves and the hems of their garments and hold their hands before their mouths and noses when the food is taken out. The cook and the bakawal taste it, after which it is tasted by the Mir bakawal and then put into the dishes. The gold and silver dishes are tied up in red cloths, and those of copper and china in white ones. This is fascinating. The Mir Bakawal attaches his seal and writes on it the names of the contents, while contents. Sorry, I'm mixing that up with content. While the clerk of the pantry writes out on the sheet of paper a list of all vessels and dishes which he sends inside, with a seal of the Mir Bakawal that none of the dishes may be changed. Lovely. Now it goes on to describe how the food is taken out. Then the next, the next part is the servants of the palace again taste the food, spread the tablecloth on the ground, and arrange the dishes. Since we are talking about Dastarkhwan, tablecloth here is Dastarkhwan. The servants of the palace again taste the food, spread the tablecloth on the ground, and arrange the dishes. And when, after some time, His Majesty commences to dine, the table servants sit opposite him in attendance. First, the share of the dervishes is put apart. When His Majesty commences with milk or curds, after he has dined, he prostrates himself in prayer. The Mir Bakawal is always in attendance. The dishes are taken away according to a particular list. Some victuals also kept half ready should they be called for. The copper utensils are tinned twice a month. Those of the princess, etc., whatever is broken is given to the braziers who make new ones. So basically, उनका जो कलाई होती है वो copper dishes की वो महीने में 2 बार होती थी कलाई. Next section is one which is loads of fun. Guys, if you are getting bored with any section, just tell me. I'll move on to the next. There's just lots to do and I'm running through it in any case. The next section is recipes for dishes. I think we'll stop at 5:30, okay? Because otherwise this can go on forever. We'll stop at 5:30 and then we can run over some Q&A and then maybe we can have another session at some point if this is interesting. If this is as interesting for you as it is for me, it is very interesting for me. I can keep doing this. Next section is recipes for dishes. There are many dishes, but description is difficult. I shall give some particulars. I'm not saying that, I'm just reading out what's being said. Cooked victuals may be arranged under 3 heads. Apa has said this, but she has said it in Urdu. So I'm just repeating this part in English. Cooked victuals may be arranged under 3 heads. First, such in which no meat is used. This is the Sufiana khana that we were speaking of, called nowadays Sufiana. Secondly, such in which meat and rice, etc. are used, which uses grain. And the third, in which meats with spices. Sadaf, I found one one kalya mentioned here, and that kalya didn't have haldi. I'm going to read that out for you in a bit. I shall give 10 recipes of each kind. I won't tell you all 10 because we'll be here forever. But the first is Zard Birinj, in which 10 says of rice, 5 of sugar candy, 3.5 of ghee, raisins, almonds, and pistachios, and half, this is half of each, 1/4 seer of salt, 1/8 seer of fresh ginger, 1.5 dams of saffron, 2.5 miscals of cinnamon. This will make 4 ordinary dishes. So this is Zard Birinj. Then there is kuska, which is rice made in different ways. Rice and salt, but it's made in different ways. After which is mentioned khichdi. And over here it is with moong dal and ghee and salt. Then is sheer birinj, which is milk and rice and sugar candy. Then is thulli, which is wheat ground, of which 1/3, I'm reading this out because it's interesting. Meat ground, of which 1/3 will be lost. Half that quantity of ghee. There 10 miscals of pepper, cinnamon, cloves, and cardamoms. Half seer of salt. Some add milks and sweet meats, and this gives 4 dishes. The next dish is chikhi, which is basically the gluten gluten is extracted from wheat flour, and it is mixed with spices and dressed with various kinds of meat. So these are some of the dishes here. I'm not going to read out more. We'll go to another section. There are also various kinds of he mentioned saag. He says that saag is made of spinach and other grains, and it is one of the most pleasant dishes. Right, had as chakki in Rajasthan. It's basically gluten. And the same thing, like in Sindh, if you go a little westwards, you have these beautiful mukund varis, which are made out of the same gluten. That's actually varis made out of gluten, which I had in Sindh, mukund varis. There are also various kinds of sugared fruit and drinks, which I cannot here describe. The second, now this was the first part, which did not involve the mention of meat, Sufiana Khana. Uh, the second section talks about the second section. One second, in which rice and meat etc. are used, talks about kabuli, which we all know. It talks about duzd biryan, which is rice, meat, salt, ghee. It talks about keema. It talks about palau. It talks about shula, which is again a dish of rice, meat, ghee, uh, which has onions, fresh ginger, garlic, round pepper, cinnamon, cardamoms, cloves, and gives 6 dishes. There's bughra. Then there is keema shorba. There's kashk. There's haris. There's halim. There's kutab, which is the people of Hind call sambusa. This is made in several ways. Kutab, Qutab. Okay, and now we have the third section. The third section is meat with spices. And of the 10 recipes that he lists in this section, we have biryan, which for a whole dashmandi sheep take 2 says of salt, 1 of ghee, 2 mashkals of saffron, clove, pepper, cumin seed, and it is made in various ways. There's yakhni, there's yulma, in which a sheep is scalded in water till all the wool comes off and then prepared like yakhni or any other way. There's kebabs of various kinds. There is musamman, which is musallam. You take all the bones out of a fowl through the neck, the fowl remaining whole, and mincemeat, ghee, 5 eggs, onions, coriander, fresh ginger, round pepper, salt, saffron are stuffed into that. This is the first part of the Aine Akbari, Raghu. This is it's here, and this is I'm page 57 onwards, so you can see like these sections what I'm reading. So this is in the first part of the Aine Akbari, and there's a lot that is mentioned in detail. I'm just running through bits and bobs of it. It mentions Dampot, and this is the Kalia, which Sadaf says he's read about. The Kalia mentions 10 says of meat, 2 of ghee, 1 of onion, 2 grams of pepper, clove, cardamoms, salt, and this will get 8 dishes. So there's onions, there's pepper, there's cloves and cardamoms, there's salt, but there's no haldi in this. In preparing kalia, the meat is minced and the gravy rather thick in opposition to the mutanjan. This is interesting because by the time we come to Shahjahanabad, I mean, we come to a later time, and then today mutanjan is actually a sweet rice and meat preparation, and kalia uses haldi and is a thin gravy. So it's very interesting how food has also evolved over time. It is very interesting to see that. On the days of abstinence, now there's a section on bread, there's a section on the days of abstinence, there's statistics of the price of certain articles. Let me read what is eaten on the days of abstinence, and then we shall finish with the Aine Akbari. Otherwise, we'll never finish with it. His Majesty cares very little for meat. And often expresses himself to that effect. It is indeed from ignorance and cruelty that although various kinds of food are obtainable, men are bent upon injuring living creatures and lending a ready hand in killing and eating them. None seems to have an eye for the beauty inherent in the prevention of cruelty. Abul Fazl should join Beta. But makes himself a tomb for animals. If His Majesty had not the burden of the world on his shoulders, he would at once totally abstain from meat. And now it is his intention to quit it by degrees, confirming, however, a little to the spirit of age. His Majesty abstained from meat for some time on Fridays and then on Sundays, and now on the first day of every solar month. On Sundays, and it goes on to describe the days on which he abstains from eating meat. And the list of recipes over here are the Sufiana ones, which we've already mentioned. So this is sections of the Aine Akbari. But there is more. This in particular describes the imperial kitchens. It describes the Adar Khana. But as you read through, the rest of the book, and as you read through the second volume describes um, all of his what do you say, subas, all of the lands that he's conquered. And for that, I've taken out bits of that as well, but for that we shall just go to the presentation. Give me a second, guys. Cut me off at 5:30 someone, otherwise I'll keep going on. Okay, let me make this big. Okay, now these sections are basically, descriptions of the Suba in the second volume of the Aine Akbari. And I haven't put down names because I want you to basically read them and guess what sections are being talked about. The first, can anyone tell me? I mean, it's very simple. Gajpati is also only one place in the country. One second, I can't. If I'm sorry, if I'm presenting, I can't see the chat. How silly. How do we do this? I can't see the chat if I'm presenting. Can you read this? Yes, it is Orissa. But can you guys read this or is it too small?
It's too small.
Then, Anand, will you read out the answers for me because I can't see the chat otherwise if I'm presenting in full screen?
Odisha.
Got it, got it. Let me just go back to the full screen of it. So the first is Odisha. So I've got that right. Anyone knows what the second is? The clues are in the names of the cities. In the first one, you can see very clear description of the pakhala. When the rice is cooked, they steep it in cold water and eat it on the second day. So you have a recipe right there. The food of the inhabitants consists of rice, fish, and eggplants and vegetables. Has anyone guessed yet what the second is? Anand, if there are any answers, please read it out for me. No? Okay, I'm going to just say what it is there. Maybe we can come back to it. Please read the third. The third is actually pretty simple. Apples, peaches, apricots are excellent. The eggs are bought from Gilgit and Little Tibet. Where is Gilgit? Baltistan. Apparel is generally of wool, a coat of which will last for some years. The horses are small, strong, and traverse difficult land. They are neither elephants nor camels. The cows are black and ill shaped, but give excellent milk and butter. Is nobody guessing? Then I'll stop this.
Kashmir. And the earlier one, somebody has guessed Gujarat. The reply is just.
Both are correct. Both are correct. Now, what's the fourth one, guys? The earlier one was Gujarat, and this is definitely Kashmir. The fourth one is fruits are of various kinds. The fourth one is a little difficult. Fruits are of various kinds, and mangoes are especially fine. In the desert tracts, a small kind of melon grows wild. Flowers are plentiful, and camels are numerous and of a good breed. It's not Rajasthan now, but it's very close to Rajasthan. Here are salt pits and iron mines. Shelly rice is abundant and of good
Kutch.
quality. Sorry?
I say Kutch.
You're very close. It's actually Sindh, because you can see that the food staple, it's on the coast, right? The staple food consists of rice and fish. The latter is smoked and loaded in boats and exported to ports and other cities. So this is base. Fish oil is also extracted and used in boat building. And there's a kind of fish called a palwa, which comes into the Indus from the sea, unrivaled for its fine and exquisite flavor. And this palwa is basically ilish. It is on the west coast, it is called palwa, and on the east coast it is called ilish, if they're talking about the hilsa. Unrivaled for its fine and exquisite flavor, the Bengali in me agrees. Milk curds of excellent quality are made and kept for 4 months. This part I'm not sure is very clear. I didn't get like a good thing that I could take a picture of. Maybe I'll just find it in the book and send it to you guys. But if you just see this is in the third volume of the Aine Akbari, you find um, ceremonies in cooking and eating being written about, and this largely concerns the what the Brahmins of Hindustan did, food that was prohibited for them: human flesh, beef, horse flesh, domestic cocks and hens, the parrot. These are the things which were prohibited. And you had to wear a certain a dress, or not wear a certain dress to sit and eat. So this describes basically what was expected of the different castes. So you can also read caste in these books, very in very evidently in many places. So this was the Aine Akbari. After the Aine Akbari, there is, of course, you have the Tuzuke Jahangiri, but I don't think we have time for that today, though I did draw out some extracts from it. So we'll let that be. We'll finish this up. And then you have all these travelers' accounts. There are at least 50 travelers who have come to India, during the Mughal times, and they've all written various chronicles of their travels. And you have beautiful descriptions of all around India. You have the Malabar, you have Bengal, you have, Tamil Nadu being spoken about. You have all parts of the country beautifully described by these travelers. And some of these are in languages like Italian and in French, which have been translated now, which have been translated now to English, and you do find them on Amazon, other places. I have a couple of books here with me. I have Bernier's travels in the Mughal Empire, and I have a Venetian at the Mughal court, which is basically, you know, the translation of works of Marco Moneta, who was from Venice. And I do have Tavernier's book, and there's also the book of Duarte Barbosa, which is in 2 volumes, which is quite interesting. The second one entirely is about India. He writes about the countries he's visited around the Indian Ocean. But I don't think we have the time today to go through all of that, so I'm going to stop presenting now, and we will do some Q&A. Not that I know anything much, but just happy to share whatever little I do. Stop presenting. Yes, Palwa is also called Palo. In fact, I read this one story. I don't know how true it is. I think it's just an urban legend that Apollo Bandar in Bombay was actually Polo Bandar. It was named after the polo fish, because that is what used to be caught there. Give me a second, guys. I'm just going to plug in my laptop because it is at 8% and dying. Just a second. In the meanwhile, I hope you enjoyed this session. I'm sorry it's gone on for so long, but what to do? There is so much to share. Which part do I not share? Oh, how do I make this shorter? I don't know. Hmm. Right, I think the laptop is charging now and I'm back. Cool. So here we are. Let's scroll back. Arey, I have to ask myself only questions. There's nobody to ask me questions. How far back do we go?
What is milk curd? I'm sorry, I'm still wondering.
What?
What is milk curd that can be stored for months?
Must be a cheese, a form of cheese. If it can be stored for months, it definitely is a form. The curds from cheese have been dried, I'm sure. It has to be that if it can be stored for months. Or just try storing curd for a few months and see what becomes of it. Mm, yes, Majuna, the original, the OG hash brownies. Mawa, mawa.
There's a nice question there. Are there accounts of food when the Badshah were at war?
You know, um, you can say that Humayun was pretty much at war for 15 years on the run. Like, I mean, there are accounts of his food when there's battle, but not very clearly. I'll have to look a little more to see if the N.A. Akbari has mentions of it somewhere, because I have read about battle foods, but I don't know where those excerpts have been taken from. Whether it's the N.A. Akbari, the Babar Nama, as far as I know, doesn't have mentions of food while at a battlefield. What I did read, which was interesting, is that the uh, word ODDO, Odo, basically meant battlefield, and Urdu was taken, was got its name on the battlefield because that is where the men of Hindustan were employed by the Badshahs to fight for them as soldiers, and that is where this mixture of Persian and Hindustani started being spoken, and it was called Urdu. This is in Barbosa's book. I read it a couple of weeks ago. I'll pull that section out and I'll share a picture. I wonder the circumstances when Baburnama was being written, space, environment, and politics thus play a big role. It he mentions that he's written some of it in like the letter was written in Charbagh. So that explains, like some of it was written there. It also mentions that a lot of it was written on the go, which is why large sections of the Baburnama are written like a diary entry. In fact, I think this was in I put this footnote in the excerpts also, because his was always, I mean, for the most part of his life, he was on the go, right? He was in one place trying to conquer another place. He only conquered Delhi in 1526, and barely 4 years later he died. So before that, he was always constantly moving from one place to the other, and a lot of times even after that, to secure his entire uh, you know kingdom, his lands. And a lot of Baburnama hence has been written like um, diary entries. And it is only when the Hindustan section comes in that you see descriptions, like the fruits. That was written after he's come to Hindustan, and he describes what he's seen there or what he's heard of there. For example, I've heard that in Bengal and Gujarat, the mango tree is beautiful. So that becomes descriptive. But the first sections of Fargana and of some of what he wrote in Fargana, Samarkand, and Kabul is very diary entry like. Bumblebee is here. He's come down for his walk. Ah, sorry, I'm sure you guys can hear him. I read it was Babar who introduced ice making to Hindustan. There was no ice making really, Jyoti. What happened was that ice in Akbar's time used to be brought down. In Akbar and Jahangir's time, ice was brought down from the Himalayas. Big blocks were cut, and in fact, there's a description in the Aine Akbari, if I'm not mistaken, which I have read, where it describes, how much people earn when they bring ice down and how it is brought down and how it is stored. So ice initially was always brought down. It was not made. It couldn't be made. So it was only got from colder places. And in fact, it's interesting to know that even as late as the late 1800s, early 1900s, ice was being shipped to India. I don't know where from. I don't remember where from. But in Bombay, the Karma Institute, a few of you must have been there, the Karma Institute, which is in South Bombay, was actually originally an ice house where ice was stored. Big blocks of ice were brought by the ship. It's right opposite the dockyard. So it was unloaded and it was stored in Karma Institute. And this was late 1800s, early 1900s, which is just, I mean, think of it now. It's crazy. Okay. Before Mughals arrived, Hindustan was already speaking Hindavi, Dehelvi, Rekta. But Baburnama, Humayunama is written in Chagatai Turkish. Yes, it is. Hence, I'm assuming they wrote the text as Dear Diary and not a book for mass consumption. What do you think about it? Maybe in Baba's case, it was written as Dear Diary, but definitely by the time it came to Akbar, it was being written to to in praise of him, to chronicle everything that the Badshah was doing. You saw the language in the Aine Akbari. It was written as a record, of what this great king was doing, and that is what it basically was. It wasn't a diary, and it is in fact Akbar who illustrated, got the Babar Nama illustrated, got the Humayun Nama illustrated, got the Akbar Nama illustrated, and got many, many, many other folios illustrated by the painters in his courts, because he wanted to create a beautiful record of what his ancestors and him have done. So how they got out was exactly this way. They were created as these beautiful folios by the court. The Humayun Nama, as we read, was commissioned by Akbar, as in not commissioned in the sense he asked Gulbadan Begum, Princess Rose Body, to write it. He asked her to write it, because he wanted her to tell Abul Fazl of anything and everything she remembered of his grandfather and his father. So that's what I think about it. Um, Coming to the next question. Even I want to know how you manage to remove the bones neatly from the bird without damaging meat, Sadaf. We have to find a guru who can teach us this. Lizzie Collingham's Curry, and also, Colleen Taylor Sain's book document a lot. They document recipes and they document excerpts from all of these folios, or from all of these translations we have been reading today. And I'd recommend both. I'd recommend you read, both as a starting point, because they just point you to more things you can read. Like Katie Achaya's books pointed me to like 5,000 texts I started looking for. His extensive research, you know, although it's only a starting point and a lot is inaccurate, but the he mentions where he's got what from, which is the mark of a serious, devoted researcher. Let me see. और कौन सा सवाल है? Yes, yes, yes. So Gujarat was correct, Kashmir was correct. Did the Mughal Padshahs drink tea or coffee? Well, tea came later. Coffee also came later. Coffee came via an you know that's with that's a very interesting story. It came with a saint. A saint. It came from Ethiopia via the Arab countries to India. He smuggled in 7 coffee beans or 9 coffee beans. I forget the exact figure, and he went and planted them in Coorg. If you look up Baba Budan, you will find the entire story on the internet. That was his name. And tea, of course, came to be introduced to us by the British, popularized by the British. Okay, so tribes in Assam were drinking tea for God knows how long, but the British at that time were buying tea from China till one Scotsman, I think, discovered the local tea in Assam, and then tea gardens were cultivated, and then the British popularized tea as a drink for the masses in the early 1900s. So Babur and Humayun were not drinking tea. Yeah, Sadaf, the evolution of Bartan is interesting. Like, it mentions what they were made of, in the Akbar Nama, but I think I'll have to look a little more to see uh, what type of bartans are, because Babur ka mujhe, I don't immediately recall any bartans being mentioned. I suppose Babur must have used bartan from already existing ones from Lodi dynasty. Yeah, that seems to be quite plausible. Um, okay, any more questions? Old Delhi has a good old barf ki dukaan from the British era. Please, when I'm in Delhi next, I have to see it. The great Dag the Fire. Akbar was dyslexic, yes, hence picture books. Shivani, that's actually a very interesting observation. I also want what Sadaf is smoking, or Majun. अरे मैं एक और चीज बताऊं, मतलब 10 मिनट 5 मिनट और लगेंगे, हाँ, टॉकिंग अबाउट व्हाट इज बीइंग स्मोक्ड, इफ यू गाइस डोंट माइंड. I don't think there are any more questions. I'll just share one more thing. Okay, one last reading, and then I will let all of you go. I also have to go and tell a story at some other session at 7 o'clock, and I haven't completed writing that story, so I also better go. एक second, हाँ, बस just this one last thing. मैं एक्सर्प्स अपने एक्सर्प्स वाला डॉक्यूमेंट शेयर कर रही हूँ. अच्छा, this is from the Tuzuke Jahangiri. Okay, the last thing I had picked out from it. Baki sab we'll read another time. Just the last one. कहाँ है? Okay. Now, Jahangir, as we all know, was an alcoholic, right? But this tells us about how he started and how he stopped. He was sick. Jahangir was sick, and they tried giving him all sorts of medicines, but nothing was working. Then they asked for a little spirit from my revered father, Akbar, and gave it to me to the extent of a tola mixed with water and rose water to take away a cough, designating it as medicine. At the time when the camp of my revered father had been pitched in order to put down the disturbance of Yusufzai Afghans at the fort of Attock, which is on the bank of the river Nilab, Indus. The Indus was called Nilab. One day I had mounted to go out to hunt. When I had moved about a great deal and the signs of weariness had set in, a gunner of the name Ustad Shah Kuli, a wonderful gunner, of course, because he gave you alcohol, a wonderful gunner out of those under my revered uncle, Mirza Hakim, said to me that if I would take a cup of wine, it would drive away the feeling of being tired and heavy. It was in the time of my youth, And as I felt disposed towards it, I ordered Mahmud, the Abdar, the person in charge of drinking water, as we read, to go to the house of Hakim Ali and bring me an intoxicating draught. He sent me the amount of 1.5 cups of yellow wine of a sweet taste in a little bottle. I drank it and found its quality agreeable. After that, I took to drinking wine and increased it from day to day until wine made from grapes ceased to intoxicate me. And I took to drinking arak. And by degrees, during my 9 years, my portions rose to 20 cups of doubly distilled spirits, 14 during the daytime and the remainder at night. The weight of this was 6 Hindustani seers, or 1.5 mounds of Iran. Seir, I think it's seir. The extent of my eating in those days was a fowl with bread and vegetables, radish. In that state of matters, no one had the power to forbid me, and matters went to such a length that in the crapulous state from excessive trembling of my hand, I could not drink from my own cup, but others had to give it to me to drink, until I sent for Hakim Humam, brother of Hakim Abul Fath, who was of the most intimate with my revered father, and informed him of my state. He, with excessive sincerity and unfeigned burning of the heart, said to me without hesitation, Lord of the world, by the way in which you drink spirits, God forbid it, but in 6 months matters will come to such a pass that there will be no remedy for it. As his words were said out of pure goodwill, and sweet life was dear to me, they made an impression on me. And from that day, I began to lessen my allowance and set myself to take filunia. In proportion as I diminished my liquor, I increased the amount of filunia. Now, who can tell me what filunia is without looking up Google Chacha? Basically, he gave no, yeah, Raghu, very close. It's opium. Filunia is opium. So yeah, so this is Jahangir speaks of his addiction in his own words here, and he tells us very honestly and clearly what he went through, and also tells us that when he stopped drinking, when he reduced his drinking, and he never really stopped. When he reduced his drinking, he started taking opium. So Filunia. That is, yeah, that's what Google Chacha told me. Filunia is it's opium. Right. So that was clearly descended from royalty. Absolutely. So yeah, guys, that. I think we are done with today. I don't see any more questions. So I think we'll call the session to a close, and I'll go and have some. Uh, I was going to say filunia, but यहाँ पे कोई filunia नहीं है. मम्मी थप्पड़ मारेंगी if I ask for filunia. एक चमचा ओपियम और चांदी. Right. So, take care. Bye bye, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the session. And I will send you guys a link. So, if the bits that you want to go through again, you can. And maybe we can do another session of more readings, from um, the travelers' accounts and the other texts that we haven't covered yet. I just wanted, to share how fun and how exciting it is to read these books for yourself. It is a rabbit hole. Once you start, you can't stop, because you just keep turning the pages, and you just keep hoping you find one more little clue, and then you spend hours on Google and look up things and discover things like Majun and Filunia. So, so this is basically me sharing my love for books. I was talking about compulsive book buying on the group. Now you can see all the compulsive books I have collected. The books I have collected compulsively over the years. Chalo, Anand, I think you can stop recording this session now. I'm just like, you know, not saying anything of consequence anymore. Jyoti, we do have a WhatsApp group.